So today's DH Colloquium is by Mthuli Buthelezi, isiZulu and Algorithms, a language-agnostic approach to developing for African languages. Now, Mthuli is a scholar interested in African languages and the digital humanities, with a focus on developing human language technologies for under-resourced languages. He's the author of 2 books, one in English and one in isiZulu, and he's published articles in English and isiZulu as well. He spent 5 years teaching at the Beijing Foreign Studies University in China, where he lectured in the Department of African Studies. And his work combines computational linguistics, corpus development, and pedagogy to advance the digital presence and intellectualization of African languages. And I think his talk is also in this space. Mthuli, I'll stop my share and then you can take over if that button actually works. My screen still sharing.
You're still sharing, yeah.
Okay, so Zoom just completely hangs. I cannot do anything. Okay, this is a first. But you can still hear me. Okay, I think I'll need to quit Zoom. Hopefully that will stop my share, and then you can take over. I'll try to be back as quickly as I can.
Please join. Yeah, come back as soon as possible.
Okay, wonderful.
So, good morning, everybody. Can everybody see my screen? I'll trust that everybody can see my screen. Can you guys see it? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So, yes, thank you, Mano, for that wonderful presentation. So as Mano has already stated, my name is Mthuli Buthelezi, and we'll be looking at some of the content that are in this book, which is actually this book is isiZulu and Algorithms, a language-agnostic approach to developing software for African languages. Of course, we're going to look at some content that are within this book, some ideas that perhaps we can get to discuss at the end of this seminar. This is the book. I have a whole bunch of copies here on my desk. But then, of course, I'm not going to share everything that is in the book. I don't want to spoil the book for you, but I'm just going to highlight some few important things that are actually found within the book. Of course, so some of the things that I'm going to cover, of course, the content that I'm going to cover in this presentation is also some of the content that also appears in the book. So in this presentation, we're going to basically look at the digital humanities and, of course, see what that is, get a definition of the digital humanities. And of course, in the book as well, there's this whole chapter on what the digital humanities are. And of course, we're going to look at, African languages and technology. I mean, that's the essence of the book, about languages and technology. And then the book also, it uses an African language as a case study, as a reference language, in this case, which is the Zulu language, to actually explore what is possible for other African languages with regards to technology, with regards to computation. And of course, looking at representing the African languages within the GUIs, or within the front-end technology of software programs. So we're going to see how that actually works So if you're having a software program within the user interface of the program, how do you actually write in a language that the program is intended for? Because the main idea in this book is that if you are developing software programs, say for particular languages, say if you are developing a software program for isiZulu, for instance, that particular software program, if it is intended, say for isiZulu pedagogy, in the front end, in the GUI of that program, the language that should appear in that program should be the language that the program is actually intended for. And of course, within the GUIs, within the user interactive interfaces, we do not necessarily only have to have a single language. We can have more than one language. We can have two languages within the user interfaces. We're going to see how that actually works. And of course, we're also going to look at using computer algorithms to study African languages. So in most cases, when you think about computer algorithms, we think about computer algorithms using computer algorithms to develop code to create software programs. But then, as you're going to see, and then of course in this book, there's an extensive discussion about how we can use computer algorithms to actually not necessarily only develop code. That's part of the reason why we can use computer algorithms. But another reason, another way in which we can apply computer algorithms, particularly in studying the resource-scarce African languages, we can actually use computer algorithms directly to actually study the languages themselves. And of course, we're going to see how that works.
Sorry to interrupt you. We only see your we don't see the actual slides in presentation mode. I'm not sure if you're changing slides, if you see something different from what we are seeing. Just want to make sure that we're looking at the same thing.
Okay, so let me try this again.
There are a lot of technical issues today. We actually tested this beforehand.
Yeah. What can you see? What can you see now?
That looks better. Now we see the title page.
Okay, so can you see the slide moving?
Yeah, we now see the book.
Okay. What can you see now?
Yeah, this all looks good. This is the contents.
Contents page. Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. Yeah, it's very strange. Having technical difficulties here, and that we're speaking about tech. How interesting. And so what we are actually going to look at is of course, the idea of creating web-based application programs particularly for resource-scarce languages. And then there's the chapter in this book, in chapter 9, towards the final chapters of the book, where I speak about creating web-based programs for resource-scarce African languages. In this book, actually, most of the software programs that has been spoken about, the software program here that the book discusses from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 8, those are the desktop type of software programs. And then towards the final chapters of the book, there's this whole discussion about creating web-based application programs. And then there's one particular example in chapter 9 of the book, a particular software program. It appears more like a desktop software program, but then if you run it, it actually connects to the internet. So it does not only, you run it locally from a PC and then it connects to the internet, and then it scrapes the data on the internet, and then it returns the data to your PC, and then you save your data locally within your PC. So that's one interesting software program, which appears as a desktop software program, but then it almost does what the web-based application programs can do. And of course, I could write another whole book about how to create web-based application programs for for resource-scarce African languages. And then, of course, if there would be funding for that kind of project, I can actually work in that kind of project. And then by this time next year, that book would be ready for review and for publication. It's a type of topic that actually fascinates me. I find that kind of work really, really interesting. Anyway, and we're gonna see a web-based application program that is written entirely in isiZulu. Right. So the digital humanities. What is this? So this book positions itself at the intersection of computational method and African language scholarship, embracing the principles of what is now called the digital humanities. Okay. So this is an interdisciplinary approach that has been used in this book. So some approaches, methods within humanities that have been applied, and also some methods from computational sciences that have been applied in describing some phenomena of language within this book. And of course, so the digital humanities that involve using some of the computational approaches, computational methods in actually solving some of the research problems within the humanities, or digital humanities involves using computational tools, computational methods in actually asking, or rather in actually answering some of the questions that we might have within the humanities, within the social sciences, and of course, within the arts as well. And so basically, within the humanities, we've always had research questions. We always do, we still do. And in most cases, when we go about answering some of the research questions, we would use theories or come up with theories to actually describe answer some of the research questions that we might have. In this book, there's a proposal that in answering some of the questions that we might have within the humanities, we can actually use an interdisciplinary approach, perhaps use some methods within computational science to answer some of the questions that we might have within the humanities, within the social sciences, within the arts. And of course, and so there's one particular question, particularly in language, a main question like, how does the brain produce language? How do humans speak? And then there have been theories that have been developed for decades to try and answer that one particular question. But now there are some approaches within computation, some models. So these are not just theories, but these are models now that have been borrowed now for some people within languages to answer that one particular question. For instance, the large language models, LLMs, they actually simulate the brain patterns. So the idea is when LLMs produce language, that's the simulation. It shows how actually the brain produces language. So LLMs as models actually show how the brain actually, we can study the LLMs, look at how they produced language, and extrapolate that model to how the brain actually produces language. And so that is one example of using an approach from computational science to answer a research question within the humanities, within the social sciences. I mean, there's one particular example. So, but then there are many other questions using interdisciplinary approaches to answer some of the questions that we might actually have. The application of computer algorithms to the study of African languages not only facilitates their linguistic analysis, but also actively contributes to their development by enabling the creation of digital tools, resources, and technologies that support their broader use and preservation. Okay, so yes, so computer algorithms. I mean, why computer algorithms? Why use computer algorithms in the study of resource-scarce languages? The argument is that by using computer algorithms in the study of these languages, they would actually lead into the development of these resource-scarce languages. It would also arguably lead to the preservation of these resource-scarce languages if these computational approaches are actually employed in the study of these resource-scarce African languages. So African languages and technology. So when I look at algorithms, it was almost as if they were designed to work with human languages. They sort of go very well with human languages. But of course, most importantly, again, I mean, in this book, I just speak about the technologies or the software programs that are designed, that are intended to work in languages. But then again, if we are designing computer software programs, we can, of course, design them not only for language, but we can also look at the need within the African context, maybe a social need, and we can design, develop computer algorithms or computer software programs that address the particular, say, social need within the African context. We can also develop software tools that actually address perhaps a particular cultural need within the African context itself. And so, right, the objective of the work that appears in this book is to develop advanced language-agnostic human language technologies, HLTs. Language agnosticism in this context arises from the notion of writing template-based code. And so now, most of the people from computation, when they see the term language agnosticism, they normally think of, say, a code that can actually be run in any programming language. But in this case, the term language agnosticism, which actually appears in the title of this book, actually refers to developing algorithms that can be relatively easily localized in any natural language. Okay, that's what the term in this context actually refers to. A template-based approach in program design entails applicability and thus versatility of the written program to other various contexts. And so that's another argument that is actually made in the book, that when we're designing algorithms, if we're developing software programs, we should develop them consciously in a way that they could be recycled. So develop computational tools that are reusable in other contexts as well. That's one of the main arguments that the book actually makes. And of course, GUI, the front-end technology, localization entails translating and adapting the interfaces into a given human language or cultural context so that the users see menus, labels, and messages in their own language. Now, the main idea, or dare I say it, the main thesis in the book is that African languages are describable are describable using computer algorithms. So the main idea is that we can use computer algorithms to study the resource-scarce African languages. Now, an African language appearing on a GUI, we don't normally see that every day. So what we normally see is, okay, so the GUI, that's a graphical user interface. That's the front part of the software program, the interactive interface of the software program. And so the argument, of course, is that the language that appears within the GUI of a software program should be the language that the software program is actually intended for, right? And so this is one particular example here where we have the algorithms here, code, and then we can incorporate a language in that particular code so that the user interface, the front part of the program, can actually appear in the target language, in the language that we seek, that we want to include in the GUI of the software program. So we can have that algorithm as the say the back end technology, and then the front part, the front end technology, that we could incorporate languages there, African languages. So here the example is actually in isiZulu, but then if we're looking at that code over there, we can include actually any resource-scarce African language within that particular computer algorithm. So if we run the code, we'd have a GUI that actually looks like this. And then if we're looking at this GUI, we're gonna see that in its face, in its interactive interface, it is written in the target language, in the intended language. In this case, the language is, of course, isiZulu. Now, using computer algorithms to study selected African languages, And then, of course, that's again another argument that this book is actually making, to say that yes, we can use algorithms to develop code, to develop software programs for languages, but you can also directly use algorithms, computer algorithms, to study or answer the particular research questions that you might have about language. So, I mean, in this book, there are a whole lot of many examples where I show some of the examples where I show how we can apply computer algorithms to study the selected aspect of language. And of course, we're going to see some few examples here as well. So say, for instance, we are interested in perhaps knowing if in isiZulu, if we can have the letter sequence LEM in the language. First of all, we're going to need a big enough data in the form of a corpus. And then that data needs to be, of course, it needs to be credible. And of course, the data needs to be big enough that it can actually, whatever the data shows, that should be extrapolated into the language itself. So the question would, does the letter sequence in isiZulu, LEM, does that actually happen? Do we have that letter sequence combination? And of course, we can use computer algorithms to answer that one particular question. It is, if we're looking at these examples over there, the algorithms here, the module that has been used is the re module that has been used, incorporated in those algorithms. The re module, of course, is a fascinating module that can be used to find patterns, match certain patterns to other patterns, substitute other patterns, include other patterns within a given linguistic data. And then, so that's the regular expression module. So that's the module. It can be imported in the programming language. In this case, it is imported in the Python programming language. And then, of course, we can run that, upload our text sample, and then we would ask the question, can we have this letter sequence in isiZulu? Okay, so, and the algorithm will give us the output, the results, and then we would see in isiZulu, in some words, you can have the trigram, that letter sequence LEM. Okay, so that's one example in which we can answer a particular question in language. I mean, of course, we can use the same approach to perhaps, if we have a question like, does isiZulu have, say, diphthongs, for example? So does isiZulu have two vowels? Can it have two vowels appearing next to each other? We can apply the same approach to actually answer that particular question. And so, I mean, that's just one example, and then we can have other examples as well. So if we're looking at that example, there's the engram function that has been incorporated in those algorithms. So here we're looking at the orthographic similarities between words there. So if we're looking, just to pick some few examples, so if you're looking at Ubuntu, looking at the orthographic relations there, we can see the results. The orthographic similarity between Ubuntu and Ubuntu is, I'm going to round it up, it's 0.5. The orthographic similarity between Ubuntu and Ubuti, it is, say, it's 0.23, right? But then what the data shows, again, through using algorithms, is that Ubuntu and Ubuntu are more orthographically similar than Ubuntu and Ubuti. And then if we're looking at that example, Ubuntu and Ubuntu, we get the result here, which is 1.0. And then here we can then conclude that of course, Ubuntu and Ubuntu are orthographically identical, orthographically similar. Another example, of course, using computer, algorithms, computer algorithms to study, to analyze some aspects of language would be this example where we find 3 words, umuntu, ikanda, ipunga. And then you would have, say, the word ipango, and then we match, again, we're still looking at measuring the orthographic similarity here. But then again, the orthographic similarity using these approaches, it does not necessarily need to be only in a single language. It could be across languages. So we can compare 2 languages here and look at there'll be a typological approach looking at the orthographic similarities of words between two and more languages. But in this case, we're having the word ipango being matched against the word umuntu, ikanda, ipunga. So what the algorithms are showing us here with regard to orthographic similarity or orthographic difference is that the word ipango is more orthographically similar to the word ipunga than to the word umuntu and iqanda. The word abantu is more orthographically similar to the word iqanda than it is to the word umuntu and to the word ipunga. The word umuzi is more orthographically similar to the word umuntu than it is to the word iqanda and to the word ipunga. The word abathakathi is more orthographically similar to the word iqanda than it is to the word umuntu and to the word ipunga. That's one example. There are a whole lot of other examples. There could be other questions as well that we can ask about language. Like in language, in a particular language, we could ask, what is the most frequently used word in a particular language? We could also ask, what is the most frequently used letter in one particular frequently used letters, least used letters as well. And of course, there's something interesting, of course, if we apply, say, the computer algorithms, for instance, so the data here is from the isiZulu language, and then what is actually appearing in isiZulu, if you are applying this algorithmic approach to study some aspects, some selected aspects of the language, we find that in isiZulu, the most used, by the way, isiZulu has a very close phoneme-grapheme relationship. And so actually the letters do represent the actual sounds themselves. So in isiZulu, we find that with regards to sounds, the sound that enjoys frequency of usage within the isiZulu language is the R vowel sounds. The vowel sound is the R vowel sound. What the algorithms are showing us is that with regards to the consonant sound, in isiZulu, the consonant sound that actually enjoys frequency of usage is the alveolar nasal sound, the N sound. And then we get this kind of result by applying these computer algorithms directly into the language itself. And something interesting actually appears. I mean, the least used sound in isiZulu is the lateral click. And then this last sound there, which appears 4,574 times within the given data, it's the least used sound in isiZulu. But then that does not. It's the alveolar trill sound, the r sound in isiZulu. And then, of course, that does not come as a surprise because this sound does not necessarily belong. It does not intrinsically belong in the language. It doesn't belong into the sound inventory of this particular language. So it doesn't come as a surprise that that it's the least used sound. Okay, this is just one example on how we can apply these approaches. And of course, the book goes on into extended detail, showing some other examples in how we can apply the algorithmic approaches in studying some aspects of language. Now, creating a web-based application, which appears in chapter 9. And so, as I've already stated, most of the software that this book speaks about is a desktop software programs. But then towards the end of the book, there's a whole discussion about the ideas of creating web-based application programs for resource-scarce African languages. And that discussion appears in chapter 9. There's one particular program in chapter 9 of the book. It's a web crawler, basically. And quite interestingly about web crawlers, web crawlers are quite significant because most of the revolutionary programs in computation are actually, by their nature, are actually web crawlers. Google is actually intrinsically a web crawler. Well, ChatGPT is also intrinsically a web crawler. So there's this discussion on chapter 9 about the Zulu web crawler. This program automatically generates the Zulu corpus. So it scrapes the internet for the Zulu text, and then it saves that data, that corpus, locally within the user's PC. And then, of course, this is the algorithm that was used to create that web crawler, that program, which can automatically generate the Zulu corpus. And then, of course, as you can see, if you look closely at the code here, you're going to see the websites that they are targeted websites that this crawler can actually crawl. So it doesn't just haphazardly or randomly try to find its Zulu text on the internet, because not all text, not all isiZulu text on the internet is actually credible, but there are sites that write credibly, that write in an acceptable way within isiZulu. If you ask ChatGPT to generate a corpus for you, it won't. If you're asking ChatGPT to generate over 5,000 tokens of isiZulu text, you are asking too much. It's not going to do that for you. And so basically, and hence the reason, the importance of actually creating these kinds of software program, the relevance of creating this kind of software program, so that we can improve performance for the resource-scarce languages. So for whatever AIs that whatever it cannot do, we can then take that, create our programs, and then improve the performance on the particular specific tasks. Nevertheless, and so that's what this program actually does. And so if you run this code, it would generate, this is the GUI of the program. As you can see in its face, in its interactive parts, it is written in the target language, of which in this case, it's isiZulu. Okay, let us all take a breather. We are halfway there. So now, of course, I have a whole bunch of copies here. So there's this book here, isiZulu and algorithm. There's another one which is written in isiZulu. By the way, these are two different books. So this one is not a translation of this one. Let me make that clear. But though these books they do speak about the same idea, the same topic, same theme, which is African languages and technology. Actually, I am also currently working on another book. I've already received the ISBN number for this book. The title of this book, it is called Izinhlelo zobuchwepheshe Ibanga 5. Though there's another book which speaks about African languages and technology, but this one that I'm actually writing right now, it is intended for teenagers. And I'll speak about this book. I'll be done writing it hopefully by the end of this year. And then I'll speak about that book in the Hunjura conference in February 2026. Okay, let's take a deep breath and let us all breathe out. We're halfway. So now you've been sitting there listening to me speak. Let us do some activity here. You also need to do something. As I'm doing something, you also need to do something at your end there. So I want you to go to this website, dahluba.streamlit.app. Dahluba. You can go to this one, or you can go to this one, ubungula.streamlit.app. If you get into that site, you might have to wake up the program there, because it doesn't have too many visitors, so it goes to sleep. So you can just wake it up and look at the web-based application program there. So now, once you have entered, you can enter here using, say, your cell phone or using your PC. Once you have entered, you should see something like this. A program for text analysis. And so in this case, this is a web-based application program, which is written entirely in isiZulu. And so in this particular case, in order for this program to work, you would have to convert your files into TXT, into plain text. And so if you have a Word file, just convert it and save it as a plain text, as a TXT file, so that this program will be able to read your file. If they are saved in any other way, the program would not necessarily be able to read it. Now, so this is a software program for text analysis. I mean, it is in its front-end technology, it's written in isiZulu, but then as we're going to see towards the end here, the wording, the strings that appear within the front end, within the user interface of this program, can be written in any language. So it doesn't have to be isiZulu, it doesn't have to be English. And most importantly as well, I mean, it is language agnostic in a sense that you can actually use it to analyze text of any language. So You don't have to only use it to analyze text written in isiZulu. You can use this program to analyze text that is written, analyze text that is written in English, for instance. So this is a software, a web-based application program, and it has functions within it. So it's like a program that has programs within it. So there's this part in this software program, the initial part, which can generate a word list from the uploaded text sample. It also shows for each word how many times each word has been used in an uploaded text sample, and that could actually be extrapolated in the language itself. And then there's this other section, which is a concordance section, studying concordances and collocation in the language. There's this other function in this program, which is the keyness analysis function. There's another function in this program, which is the engram function. And engrams to me are actually quite fascinating. I do go into detail here in the book discussing what engrams are, because normally in languages, in linguistics, we normally study syllables, we study morphemes, we study words and phrases and sentences. But then this book actually argues that along with studying syllables and morphemes, in African languages, in linguistics, we should also look at study engrams as well, because they're actually very, very important, particularly in the context of computation. Why are they so fascinating? One of the reasons is that because if you want to parse text, if you want to tag text of a given language, say a low resource scarce language, if you want to parse morphemes in that particular language, people are working on this. There are developing parsers for the lesser resource languages. But then in most cases, most algorithms cannot, not unless they are trained, they cannot automatically parse the text according to the morpheme constituency of a given language. But then if you put in the engram function within the algorithms, algorithms will be able to parse tag the text according to its, say, bigrams, according to its trigrams, quadrigrams, and so on. So it's a fascinating function that can be incorporated in language analysis and in studying languages. Another important function, and of course, we're going to look at this function as well, which is the function in this program that can automatically generate the number of letters, and then it shows how many times each letter was actually used in an uploaded text. And then we can then extrapolate that. If maybe, say, in a particular text of a particular language, if we found the vowel R sound being frequently used, if the data is credible enough, remember, but the data needs to be credible, because garbage in, garbage out. But if the data is credible enough, we can then, whatever it is that we see from the data, we can then extrapolate that to the language itself. So if the corpus data is showing that the most used sound in this uploaded text is the R vowel sound, then we can say in this particular language, which this corpus comes from, the most used phoneme is the R vowel phoneme. Nevertheless, and then there is another function here, the word cloud function within this program. It's a fascinating function program, and we're going to look at it here. Here, so we're going to see it just now. But most importantly, we can add any other functions within this particular application program. It doesn't have to be only these ones. We can add some more. There's one particular one that I'm thinking about. Again, it generates the images. I want to create a particular function that is able, if you upload the text into it, it should show the words in a three-dimensional space, right? Because the argument that people are making these days is that the way that LLMs work is that there's back propagation, by the way, in how LLMs are able to produce language. But then if you can see it, it's almost like it's almost more like the words are in this three-dimensional space, and all the words are sort of seeking relations with one another. Some words have got strong bonds, some words have got weaker bonds. And I want to be able to generate a kind of a function that is able to generate the image of words of the uploaded text in the three-dimensional space. And then, of course, the argument is that since the LLMs are simulating how the brain works, then the idea is that in the brain, that's also how language works when humans are producing language. If you can think about it in that way, in the brain, there's this kind of three-dimensional space where all the words are actually trying to form bonds. Some words form stronger bonds, some words form weaker bonds. And I think that's quite fascinating, quite interesting indeed. And so hopefully I might include that type of function in this type of program. But nevertheless, here is one example of what the program can do: generate word frequency of letters. Sorry, the letter frequency generation here. So it can show how many times, if you upload the text, it will show you how many times each letter was used. And then it shows the letters in the percentage form as well, the usage. There's another interesting button which is found within this platform, which is it's a button that is able to save the generated data. It's able to save it locally into the user's PC. So once the output has been generated, remember this is a web-based application, so everything happens online. But some people may not necessarily have enough bandwidth to stay online and do the text analysis. So this particular button within this platform, where the user can actually save the data. The data can be saved as a CSV file. It can also be saved, in a case of word cloud, it can be saved in a PNG file format. And I think there's a fascinating button that all of these functions have at the bottom, in this platform, in this web-based application platform. Now, so there's another function here. Can you all still hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
No, we can still hear you. We can still see your slides.
Okay. I think they oh my God, it could be load shedding here. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so let me just jump to the end, because I may run out of power before I finish speaking. Okay, so there's this. So here we are talking about incorporating, of course, African languages within computer algorithms. And of course, we can do this in this way. This is one particular example. So in that web-based application platform, it is written entirely in isiZulu, but then it can be written in any other language. And these are the parts of the algorithm in which we can include the languages. So if you have that part of the algorithm, the back-end technology, in the front-end technology of the program, we can include the words of the target language. Okay, so it wouldn't have to be necessarily only one language that appears in a user interface. It could be any natural language, and of course, it could be in a case where we're speaking about bilingualism, we could have more than one language appearing in a GUI, particularly for programs that are developed for pedagogical purposes. What this book actually argues is that for those kind of the wording in those software programs should be written in the language that the program is actually intended for. Okay, so if the program is intended for isiZulu, the argument is that in the wording that appears in the GUI of the program, the words there should be written in the isiZulu language if that particular software program is intended for the isiZulu language. Right. So this is the book. So let's quickly look at some of the contents of the book. Okay, I don't know what's happening. I think it's probably load shedding. Let me quickly go through this. Okay, so so this is the book. And then I have a whole bunch of copies here. So these are the copies for the book that is written in isiZulu. And of course, these are the copies for these. These are just, I have a whole lot of copies back inside the house. And of course, so I'm not going to speak about everything that is within this book. I don't want to spoil the book for you. If you want to know more about some of the contents that are in this book, then you have to you have to get the book. Nevertheless, it speaks about GUIs, of course. So writing in African languages at the front end technology, writing in African languages, writing the GUIs in African languages. It speaks about algorithms, the significance of algorithms as well, and how algorithms, as we have seen, how they can be adapted to study some selected aspects of languages. And it also speaks about the computer-driven research methodologies. I think in essence, that's what I was also speaking about in this presentation. And but what we have seen in the literature is that for low resource languages, that that approach, the computational approach, is not necessarily applied much, relatively speaking. It's not applied much as compared to relative to the high resource languages. And then it argues for, in African context, in African languages, in African linguistics, that approach should be adopted when we are studying African languages, that computational driven approach, those approaches should be adapted in the study and when we're studying African languages. It speaks about the corpus. It describes what the corpus is in detail. It speaks about the significance of the corpus, particularly in creating human language technologies for low resource scarce languages. It speaks about the programming language. It defines what the programming language is. The question would be, why programming, why Python? Oh, sorry, the Python programming language. It speaks of, I mean, why the book does actually say that it doesn't necessarily have to be the Python programming language. It could actually be any language that can be used in developing tools for. It doesn't necessarily have to be Python. But then in this case, the programming language that was applied in the development of these tools is the Python programming language. It speaks about that. There's a particular chapter here, chapter 1.4 in chapter 1, page 6. Where it says the formalization and application of the Python programming language to African languages. So it's almost like introducing Python formally in the study of African languages. It speaks about regular expressions, which is a very fascinating module. And we saw it here in some of the examples. I mean, there are many other modules that can be imported into the Python programming language that we can use to, of course, to study languages. But regular expressions is just one example there. It speaks about language agnosticism. Speaks about localization. Some of the software program that has already been developed can be localized into African languages. Localization, I argue, if we're localizing these software programs, the wording in the user interface should be written in a language that the program is being localized to, a program that is being localized for. It speaks about engrams as well, the significance of engrams. This book goes on to argue, when it defines engrams, it goes on to argue that if you are studying morphemes, we should study morphemes and syllables and words along with engrams. Particularly, I mean, as I've already stated, computer algorithms are very good at tagging, engrams and a given data, but computer algorithms have to be trained in tagging morphemes. But then engrams are, I think, they are actually fascinating. This book also speaks about that as well. It also speaks about readability, about using algorithms to measure readability, and also using algorithms to create code that will be used to create software programs or readability formulas. It also speaks about algorithms and dictionaries, the corpus-driven research methodology in writing and establishing dictionaries for low resource languages. It speaks about algorithms as well, and how we can use algorithms to write dictionaries that are in a software program format. So for most low resource African languages, dictionaries exist as hard copies like this. But then what this book actually argues is that for African languages, we should actually develop software dictionaries that are in a software program. And there's this whole section of user friendliness. So the argument is that for dictionaries that are in hard copies, particularly for Bantu languages, it's very hard for users to find certain words because you have to distinguish between a prefix and a stem. But then with dictionaries that are in a software program, you don't have to worry about that. You can just type in the word that you're looking for without necessarily having to distinguish between the augment, the initial vowel, the prefix, and the stem itself. And then it speaks about, of course, in chapter 9, the idea of developing web-based application platforms for resource-scarce African languages. And of course, if there is funding, I would love to write a book on that, about how we can create web-based application platforms for resource-scarce languages. And when we saw one example there of that corpus analysis tool, which is written entirely in isiZulu, we can create a whole plethora of such programs for African languages. And of course, this book does have code in it, which is written in it. And then the code here is, of course, open source. The code is replicatable. And of course, this code can also be developed further. And so, of course, the code is open source. So anybody can can use the code that is actually in this book that is used to write that is used to develop the software programs. But if people, of course, if they are going to use some of the code that appears here, of course, they would have to reference this book as well. Okay, so I think we have 3 minutes left. So thank you very much. I'm sorry to have such a, 3 minutes is not enough time to go through questions, but of course I'll take questions. And I don't know what is happening, but if I disappear, do not get worried. That would mean that my power has run off. Thank you very much. I hand it back to you, Menno.
Okay, thank you very much, Mthuli, for an interesting presentation. There are a few questions, but let me quickly skip a few and let me get to an important one that was asked. So where can we get the books?
Get the books?
I mean, you have them in your hand, but that doesn't mean that we can read them at the moment.
What's that?
So you have them in your hands, but we can't access them.
Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna I'm gonna put my account, my Gmail account there, and then whoever wants the book would have to email me.
Okay, wonderful.
Let me write it here on chat. Where's the chat button? Let me write it here. It's Mthuli Buthelezi at gmail.com. Mthuli Buthelezi, sorry, Mthuli Buthelezi 08. Mthuli Buthelezi 08 at gmail.com. So anybody that wants the book, they can get in touch with me on that email address.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So there were a few more questions. I know that we're also kind of running out of time, but I think we can discuss a few of them. I think some you actually answered a little bit later. So Benjamin Shipster mentioned, so this was related to the large language models right at the beginning, whether it's observing the brain to develop LLMs instead of investigating LLMs to or look at LLMs to develop the brain. But I think afterwards you mentioned that, so the idea that LLMs are based on kind of ideas around the brain, right?
Yes. Yeah, so they are, I cannot see the question, but anyway, so there will be they're like, actually, the LLMs are designed not as something as how they are used today. The people that generated LLMs, created LLMs, were trying to understand how the brain actually functions. So they were creating models to try and simulate the brain function. And so basically the way that LLMs work, they're actually intended to actually show us how the brain functions when it produces language. And so, I mean, other people can argue against that idea. I mean, I know that Noam Chomsky is not happy, wouldn't be happy with that idea. The generativists, the whole school of generativists wouldn't like that idea of, of using, say, the computer simulations that happened in LLMs to extrapolate that and actually state that this is what happens in the brain. So, but then the argument is that we can look at how LLMs produce language, and then whatever technique that they use, we can extrapolate that, we can generalize that to language and say, this is what happens when the human language produces language by looking at the LLMs as they simulate the neural networks in the brain.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Now, I think you said it in the end. I think the beginning was a little bit unclear. I'm
Unclear.
quickly combining a few questions. So I know there are more questions. So Robin asked, is it much more complicated to make the GUI available in multiple languages to increase
No,
accessibility? And
no,
Muzi, in
it's
the
not.
same line, essentially asked, can you adapt this
Adapt this
app
app.
to other Nguni languages with similar structures, such as Siswati?
Of course, absolutely, of course, that it is the. I mean, the only problem might be, I mean, this is up for people who are developing terminology. So, for instance, what would you call concordancy in isiZulu? I mean, for me, I do have that kind of a word, but then for Siswati, it will be, what do you call concordancies? And that people, terminology developers would have to come up with that particular term, and that's it. And then it's just including, substituting some of the words that are there. If they're in English, we put the Siswati words or words of any other Nguni language, and then that's basically it. And then it becomes, I mean, now with with the internet, it is. I mean, there is this free hosting platform which is called Streamlit that I'm currently using. It's absolutely free. It's totally for free, and then we can either host these web-based application programs for African languages, host them in these open source platforms, or for other institutions as well, they might want to create their own website to host these kinds of web-based application web application programs. But short answer, it's not that's the whole point of the whole presentation. The whole point of the book, that it is the thesis is, it is definitely possible, well, to describe African languages using computational approaches. It is definitely possible to localize existing software programs for these low resource scarce languages. So again, the term language agnosticism, it actually denotes that idea that regardless of the language, so the program that I just showed, the web-based application program, it will work. It can analyze text of any language, right? And then the text in the front-end technology of that program can also be translated in any other language. No, short answer, it is possible, definitely. We can definitely, that's the whole purpose again of this presentation, adapting the existing applications for low resource scarce African languages.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I know we're running a little bit out of time. I see people are leaving as well. Let me see. So there was one question I think is important. Is it safe to use these apps to analyze data?
Good question. That's a very good question. It's the most important question ever. And another thing, we don't normally, until you start developing these tools, and you could see how easily things can actually go wrong. You don't see them if you're just using these tools. I remember in our class, third year class, when we were using the wordsmith tools, we were just using it, but then we were not asking how safe it is. It's like the butterfly effect, the thing with this kind of tools. It's like the small bug can create, it can cause a whole disaster, right? And so, of course, and again, that's why some people would perhaps say, no, let us use wordsmith because it is reviewed. But then what I'm arguing is, exactly, this is the starting point. So once we have, say, this kind of tools online, now the question, the following work would, of course, evaluating these kind of tools to see, I mean, look at the performance initially, see how they perform for the low resource scarce languages. And another thing, and I mean, finding bugs is not actually quite easy, but then also trying to, I mean, we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And then also trying to, of course, trying to find what could be wrong with the tools, because yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a very good question. And that's why, again, I mean, I'm wearing this t-shirt. Some people would know this, or we have GitHub here at the bottom. So there's another whole community. It's like GitHub is a true example of Ubuntu, people sharing things together. And I always imagine this amongst linguists in the African context, among computational linguists in the African context, having these kind of platforms where they sort of share the software programs and also test for rigor, and also sort of peer review these kind of platforms to see if they are suitable enough for, say, a pedagogical context, for instance. That's what I've always imagined in my head. I'm surprised that the true example of Ubuntu, it comes from societies that are seen as being individualistic, and yet the societies that are seen as having Ubuntu do not have such an amazing example of what Ubuntu actually is.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think I see one other question. I might have missed something. The question is related to, so how can we use something like this from a consumer side? So that was Bandile asking
From a
this.
consumer side.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, that perhaps a little marketing. I mean, if you market something use in a customer's language, that has more resonance than if I'm marketing it in a language that the user speaks as an additional language. And so if the language appears, say in a marketing context, if it appears in the users, if the language in the GUI
Oops, I think that is the effect of the load shedding or the power problems that he had. Yeah, that's unfortunate because now I can't thank him for a nice presentation. But so if you have more questions, the contact details were in the chat. So that's Mthuli Buthelezi 08 at gmail.com. So if you still have additional questions, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them via email as well. But thank you everybody for being here and listening to this interesting presentation. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.